Welcome back, folks. Today's episode is all about non-native EMFs, electromagnetic frequencies, and should you be concerned about them? Where are they coming from? Why might there be a problem for our physiology, our body, our performance, our longevity? And a discussion about what we can do to mitigate the effect of these non-native EMFs on our system. My guest today is Arthur Menard. He is the founder and CEO of a company called Lambs, which makes clothing that is designed to defend us from some of these non-native EMFs. Arthur got interested in this field very early in the game. He has a master's degree in engineering and biology, so he's got a really solid rooting in the science, both human science and in engineering. So it's a fascinating conversation. And if by the end of the conversation you're feeling inspired, we are both wearing our Lambs hats, caps in this interview. You'll notice I didn't put it on for the to record this part. I probably should have. And so they make caps and beanies to protect your brain. They make underwear for men. They make T-shirts, long sleeve shorts for women and men. And their product line is constantly expanding. They actually even have the cutest little baby blankets ever, if there's any newborns in your life. Anyway, before you go shopping, you're going to want to listen to the interview and get educated. If you do decide you want to go shopping, then you'll want to go to getlambs.com. There's actually a custom link in the show notes. If you don't use the custom link, you can still get a really nice discount by using discount code longevity. Remember that none of the information in this podcast is intended for anything other than information purposes only. Before you change anything in your life, before you start a new supplement or whatever the case may be, please make sure that you check with your medical provider and your doctor to make sure that this is right for you. If you enjoy this episode, please make sure to leave us a review. And please also make sure to share it out with your friends, family, your networks, anybody who you think would also get benefit from the episode. If you're looking to contact me or to reach me, you can find me through my website, which is natniddam.com, or you can find me on Instagram, which is natalieniddam.com, or on Facebook in the Optimizing Superhuman Performance group. Make sure when you join the group and or when you go to my website that you sign up for my newsletter. I just launched that a couple of weeks ago, and it will always be chock full of cool information, little nuggets of research that I've come across, events that are coming up that I might be participating in. I'm going to be launching a women's retreat in the spring in March in the Dominican Republic. I've got a peptide course coming down the pipes. I'll be speaking at different engagements in the States. So make sure that you sign up for that newsletter so that we can keep track of each other. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you guys and enjoy the episode. Hey, folks, just a little bit of housekeeping before we launch into the episode. Please remember that all of the information provided in these podcasts is for information purposes only. We are never offering treatments, cures, whatever for any kind of disease or medical condition. Anything you hear about here is going to be intriguing. There's some research around it, but make sure that you check with your medical provider before you go off and do any of this stuff for yourself. All right. So enjoy the episode. And also, if you're looking to connect with me for any reason, with your comments, questions, whatever it may be, you can reach me through my website, which is natniddam.com, or you can find me on Facebook in the Optimizing Superhuman Performance group, or on MeWe in the Biohacking Superhuman Performance group. And of course, you can also follow me on Instagram, which is at Natalie Niddam. Natalie is with an H between the T and the A, the second A. So thank you so much for being here. Appreciate you guys. Enjoy the episode. Welcome, Arthur, to the podcast. It's so nice to meet you in person, and I love your hat.
Thanks, Natalie. It's a pleasure to be here and to be pretty well matched today.
I know. I got my Lambs gear on. I'm so excited. So I'm really stoked about this podcast because EMFs is something that, well, it's only getting bigger and bigger in the world as 5G rolls out. I heard somebody talking about 6G one day, and I don't think we're done even dealing with 5G yet. So I'm really excited about this episode. But I think before we kind of get started on anything, I'm curious about you. Tell us about Arthur, and how you came to be where you are today, doing what you're doing. And geographically, you've come a long way. So let's hear it.
That's interesting. I usually don't speak about the geographic aspect, but yeah, the accent's from France. Grew up in Paris, and from as long as I can remember, I've always had a mind for creating solutions. So when I was a kid, I remember telling my parents that I wanted to be an inventor or an engineer instead of being a firefighter or an astronaut or what have you. So that was kind of my jam from very early on. And fast forward a few years, when I was in my teens, I realized that the choices that I was making on my health today, and especially whilst being young and being healthy, would have a compounding effect on my health in the future. And this was a realization that came looking at family members or friends of family who started developing the traditional modern diseases that you see, like cancer, cardiovascular disease, et cetera, et cetera. So I became passionate about health and wellness, and started just reading books after books after books. The passion turned into guided my studies. I graduated with a master's degree in engineering and biology, and especially with a special focus on human health.
Yeah.
And so that's probably where the genesis of the company came from, which is in the recent years, we've been focusing on what we're putting inside of our bodies.
Mm-hmm.
There is another factor that really matters, which is what we're exposing our bodies to. So what we have on the outside, and whether it is the products that we're using at home, like what we're putting on our skins, or the environmental stressors, such as pollution, such as UV rays, overexposure to UV, or such as wireless radiation or EMF. These have a long-lasting effect on our health too. And when we got started with Lambs, there was no solution for many of these external stressors, and that was our mission, to help people be healthier and attain their health goals. And yeah, so essentially created Lambs to scratch my own itch as well, which is I could find great food, I could find a lot of things, but I could not find something that would help with the external stressors. And so created the company here in the US a few years ago. And since then, we've been on a mission to create the best products as possible to help our community of forward-thinking, health-conscious people.
Great. I love it. So why EMFs? Just out of curiosity, like, are you, I know that I talk to people all the time, and people vary in their belief of how much EMFs affect them, right? Like, I will meet people who say, I'm extremely sensitive to EMF. I can tell, which, I feel bad for those people, because at this point, it's not easy to get away from, non-native EMF radiation, which I think we should probably explain to people what this is exactly, in case someone's listening and isn't up to speed on this. But, other times you'll meet people, and actually even me, like, I've never really believed that I was particularly sensitive to EMFs until this fall, when I spoke at a conference in Kentucky that was in a really interesting place. It was in a place we were camping, and we were in a place where there was no cell reception. So to begin with, I don't remember the last time I was in a place with no cell reception. Like, it's just not easy, right? Like, last year I went camping with my husband and my son in this massive national park called Algonquin Park in Ontario. And even though you're not supposed to have cell reception, you kind of do. So we pretended we didn't have cell reception for 4 days, but we did, right? So theoretically, we're still exposed. And so what was really surprising to me on this experience in October, I guess it was, is that even though I was sleeping in a tent and in the middle of a giant storm one night and really cold the next night, so, under any circumstances, seriously, physically uncomfortable, my sleep metrics the next day, my heart rate variability, my recovery scores were higher than I've ever seen them, ever. And that was kind of when the light went off and I went, oh, maybe I am affected by EMFs. I'm just so used to it that I don't realize it. So, if you could maybe explain a little bit about what EMFs are, and because, there's natural electromagnetic frequencies in the earth, and we want those. That's why we want to walk around barefoot at least some of the time, but we're talking about something quite different here.
Yeah. So right before I get into what EMFs are, what the category of people that you just described before are called electrosensitive persons. And these are people who actually feel the effects of EMFs on their bodies. So headaches, brain fog, et cetera, et cetera. And it's estimated today that about 4% of the population is suffering from electrosensitivity, whether in an acute form where, like you have real difficulties falling asleep, or you have real headaches if you're in an environment with a lot of EMFs. But that doesn't mean that the 96% remaining are not affected. And actually conducted studies on the effect of wearing lamps, which effectively removes EMF from, or like significantly reduces the amount of EMF reaching your body, on a variety of factors, including heart rate variability. And we can get into this later, but so before that, as you said, probably important for your listeners to outline what EMFs are. So EMFs stand for electromagnetic frequencies, and these exist naturally. As you said, the Earth emits very low frequency EMFs. Our bodies emit very low frequency EMFs as well. But in the recent years, we've had the emergence of non-native EMFs, which are man-made electromagnetic fields. And these are at a much higher frequency, for the most part, than what exists. So the part of EMF that we're interested in today, you have ionizing radiation, which are, way up the spectrum. We're talking about nuclear radiation, et cetera, et cetera. These are obviously very bad for your health because they have enough energy to knock off electrons from your DNA and create mutation, which turn into a variety of health problems. In middle, you've got the visible light, which is an electromagnetic field. And ultraviolet are part of it and can be dangerous for our health as well. Mm-hmm. And then right underneath, you have radio frequencies and microwaves. So microwaves would be effectively the same as in your microwave, but also emitted by your cell phone, emitted by your Wi-Fi, emitted by your Bluetooth devices, effectively anything that is communicating with wirelessly. So your car emits EMF because it's connecting with your phone and or the internet. Any smart appliances that you have, that's how they communicate with the internet. Your cell phone, because that's how they communicate with cell phone towers and get cell phone coverage, as well as the internet. Your smartwatch, that's how they communicate with your smartphone. Your computer, as well as your Wi-Fi router, to name a few. So
it's amazing it's amazing to me how Wi-Fi routers are now made so that you virtually can't turn them off.
That is true.
Have you noticed that? Like,
I wanted to put a timer in mine to shut off at night, and realized that I couldn't. I had to buy a physical plug that programmer so that I could.
Mine has a battery backup. They've built this thing. Like, you would think that it's running like, I don't know, like an iron lung for someone who can't breathe or something. Like, there's so many backup systems in this thing so that it never shuts off. Like, I think the only way for me to turn it off is to go online and turn it off from like the hub. And then but then I need another computer that I can hardwire into the system so that then I can go back on. And it's really interesting how committed telecom companies are to keeping us Wi-Fi connected. Anyway, sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
Oh, no problem. So these are the EMFs that we're going to be talking about today, and they're really the ones that are that we have a growing exposure to. So if you look at 20 years ago, our cell phones were bricks that you would carry. 20, 30 years ago, cell phones were bricks that you were carrying in your backpack using once a week. And now fast forward, then you had wireless computers, and then smartphones and wearables and smart appliances, 5G that is being developed, etc. So the amount of wireless radiation or EMFs that we're being exposed to today is immensely higher than what it was 20 years ago. So the estimation that was done by Professor Johansson in the Sweden Institute of Cancer, if I remember correctly, is that we're exposed to quintillion more radiation today than 20 years ago. And actually, quintillion. So that's a 1 in 15 zero behind.
Wow.
Which essentially we can't fend them. And that's why EMF today are considered to be an external stressor, because the amount that we're exposed to is completely different than what our bodies have been used to in nature. And it's not just a little bit more exposure, it's a lot more constant exposure. And I'm happy to get into the details of what's happening in our bodies when exposed to radiation.
Yeah, no, I would love to do that. And also, I think what compounding it on top of that is the removal of what we talked about earlier, which is exposure to the natural EMF of the earth, which, like we've become so disconnected from our environment in so many ways. Like people might notice they go on holidays. And even though there's going to be EMFs where you're on holidays, if you're in a place where you go on a beach holiday and you're walking barefoot on the beach every day, you will feel different. You will sleep differently just from that reestablishment of that connection in a way that, especially people living in cities, which is a lot of us now.
Yeah, you can't find a lot of nature or real nature in cities nowadays.
Yeah, it's you got to work at it, right? So, yeah. Anyway, so let's talk about the effect of EMFs on our body, because I know, it affects calcium channels, it affects DNA, it affects so many different things. And ultimately, I think for a lot of the electrosensitive people, that's what you call them, right? Electrosensitive. It's a nervous system issue. It keeps them in a sympathetic state all the time. Like a lot of these people will say to me that they feel like they're always amped up. They never really are able to shut down, which is ultimately what affects the HRV, the sleep, the recovery, and everything else. But on a more tangible level, like let's talk a little bit about those more tangible effects. So you were talking to earlier.
And it's interesting because you've essentially covered most of what we're going to be talking about.
But in a simplistic way.
And feel free to cut me off if anything that I'm talking about is too technical or that I'm going too deep or anything on anything. So let's back up a little bit and look at what electromagnetic radiation is or frequencies are. So they're essentially a field which is made out of, they're made out of two fields, like an electric field and a magnetic field. And this is very important because some of our cells respond to electric currents. And that's how some of the signals, especially on our nerves, are being processed by the body. In particular, we have on some of our cells what is called calcium voltage-gated calcium channels.
Right.
Calcium is an essential element in our body, not just because it's an essential component of our bones, but also because it's used as a transmitter of information. So usually, not usually, like the amount of calcium that is, there's a lot more calcium outside of our cells than inside of our cells, and the way some of the message transmission is happening in our bodies is by opening little channels in our cell membranes that will create an influx of calcium ions inside our cells. Right. This influx of calcium ions is in very specific cases, and what happens with EMF is that the electric field of these radiation impact those voltage-gated channels and open them up. which creates an influx of ions in our cells, and especially in our mitochondria, which is the energy factory, if you will, of the body. This is where ATP, the essential molecule that is considered to be energy, is being created. And this calcium, this influx of calcium, which is not natural in a specific case, it's triggered by EMF, create a cascade of reactions. And the end result of this cascade of reaction is peroxynitrate, which is a molecule that can travel from cell to cell, and that breaks down into a couple of components. One of them is free radicals.
Right.
So just to simplify, essentially, exposure to wireless radiation opens up calcium-gated channels, creates an influx of calcium. This triggers a cascade of reaction that the end results that results in the end in free radicals from a molecule that is small enough to travel to our cell nucleus and to different cells around. Now, free radicals are a real issue in our bodies today. They're also known as ROS, reactive oxygen species, and they're being created during inflammation processes. That's usually how the body fights inflammation. But they're molecules containing an oxygen atom that are missing an electron. And this state of missing an electron is an unstable state. And in order to become stable again, these reactive oxygen species are trying to steal electrons from nearby molecules. The moment they steal an electron from a nearby molecule, this nearby molecule is now missing an electron as well, and will try to do the same thing. This process is called oxidation. And you have a great example of it if you cut an apple into, leave it on your counter, and the apple turning brown. This brown part is what oxidation does to the apple.
Kind of like rust.
And similar to rust, exactly.
Yeah. Yep, so we're it's a little bit of a rusting process, which is I don't think it's any better for us than it sounds, particularly.
Exactly. And because this is not great for the body, except if it's to treat inflammation, what will happen is the body has natural defenses against this oxidation, and especially against free radicals, which are called antioxidants. So antioxidants are molecules that can give out an electron to those free radicals in order to stabilize them without themselves becoming unstable. And that's how the body is able to counteract oxidation when it happens naturally in the body. Now, the problem with modern living today is that we're exposed to a lot of environmental and internal stressors that are increasing the amount of free radicals we have in our body to a point where a lot of the time our antioxidants that we're producing naturally are not enough in order to counteract the free radicals. So wireless radiation increases free radicals, but so does unhealthy eating, so does sleeping poorly or not exercising, and even stress, like just pure stress from work and all of what we're exposed to today. And so we're very often in our daily lives today as modern humans suffering from what's called oxidative stress, which is when we have too many free radicals compared to the amount of antioxidants that can fight them off. And so this process and this oxidative stress is essentially the same process as rust, the same process as what we've discussed on the apple, and it's damaging our lipids, our proteins, and our DNA in our cells, and ultimately can cascade into is the root cause of a lot of today's modern diseases, such as cancer, such as cardiovascular disease, such as
diabetes
as well. I mean, there are it's essentially linked with a ton of problems that we have, as well as brain fog, lack of energy, migraines, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of times people hear about wireless radiation doing X, Y, and Z and kind of sound like it's responsible for, everything and everything. But the reality is it's essentially responsible for increasing the amount of free radicals, increasing the risk of being in oxidative stress, which is the root cause of a lot of diseases, depending on what you're sensitive to and depending on where your body is at. So that's why some people will be more sensitive than others. And that's why some people will develop cancer versus cardiovascular disease versus nothing.
Yeah.
And yeah, so this is essentially the cellular, that's what's happening to our cells when exposed to wireless radiation. And the types of cells that have those voltage gated calcium channels are usually in our heart, our genitals, our brain, especially the blood-brain barrier, which is used to filter the blood and potential toxins from reaching our brain, and our gut as well, especially our gut barrier. So this is why these organs are especially affected by wireless radiation. And then you discussed about the state of being in a sympathetic nervous response, and which is called a state of fight and flight, which is a way to observe how wireless radiation impact the body as well today, because we've discussed about oxidative stress being the root cause of a lot of long-term disease, but the reality is your body is not just impacted like in 30 years compounded, but also today. So for this, we need to talk a little bit about the autonomous nervous response, which is our body is essentially has all the unconscious functions. So all those functions that we don't have control over, such as digestion, pupil dilatation, salivation, et cetera, including our immune system. And they're comprised of two main branches, the sympathetic nervous response and the parasympathetic nervous response. And to simplify, a lot of people call the sympathetic nervous response the fight or flight response, whereas the rest and digest is the parasympathetic nervous response. So fight and flight is great when you're being chased by a lion or when you're hunting. So it is the state that you'll be in when you're exercising or if you're doing something highly stressful. And then rest and digest is the state where your body should be in the majority of time, where it's resting, it's recovering, and it's doing all of its natural processes, such as digestion, for instance. So the body is a very well created machine where if you're being chased by a lion, it's essentially like, okay, digestion is maybe not so important right now.
No.
Let's focus on running as fast as possible and diverting all functions that are not essential in this very moment, so that we have more, so that we're really focused on the flight. With the exposure to wireless radiation, what happens is this is taken from as an external stressor by the body, just like if you're sick, or if you've just cut yourself, or that kind of processes, and your body is reacting to this external aggression or reacting to the oxidative stress that is happening inside of your body, and has a tendency, and this favors the sympathetic nervous response, which means that your body will be less able to be in a recovery state for anything else that you're doing.
Exactly.
So that's how it impacts us today, with poorer sleep, for instance, with potential brain fog as well, with sometimes a lack of energy long-term because you have your recovery processes that are impacted, and also with your immune system that is not as effective, or that is potentially impacted by this exposure to wireless radiation, and will not be as efficient than if the body is fully recovered and fully rested, as it should be.
Yeah, I think that what's important to mention here for the immune system, which I was going to point out, is that when you're in a sympathetic response, when you're fleeing from the lion, it turns out that your immune system at that point is not deemed to be particularly, it's not at the top of the list for survival.
Right.
It will be, but it's not right now. And
Yep.
if you stay in that kind of heightened state of vigilance, if you will, then it's kind of like the immune system gets downgraded in the list of priorities. And so I think these days we know that one of the things that we really want to keep online is a healthy immune system. So
I think a good analogy for this is to look at your body as a village or something of the sort. It's essential for a village that would be living autonomously to be tending to its fields if you want to be eating down the road. But and if there is a fire in the village, usually firefighters can take care of it. But now if there are 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different fires in the village, what's going to happen is the firefighters are not going to be enough. And so the whole village is going to be in panic, and tending to your fields now doesn't seem so important. So you're going to be trying by all means to be fighting those fires. And this fire alerts is essentially what's happening with wireless radiation when it's hitting your body. This is the oxidative stress, and the antioxidants would be the firefighters. But at some stage, your body is just trying to prioritize every function that is like fighting right now the effect of wireless radiation, even though there are a bunch of factors that come into play, like we talked about damaging DNA. That's what oxidative stress can do. We have then repair mechanisms in the body in order to repair DNA that happen. But these consume a lot of ATP, a lot of energy that is then cannot be used for the natural functioning of our cells. So just like in a village, if you had a bunch of fires and you diverted your resources you have towards fighting them off, you have a lot less resources down the road for your normal functioning.
Yeah, no, that's a great analogy. I like the village on fire analogy. That's actually a great way to put it. And of course, as we talk about, this is about capacity, right? Your body, as you pointed out, which I think is really important to point out, like your body does have the ability to deal and to manage and to mitigate a lot of inflammation and a lot of these issues. It's just that when it's constant and coming from all these different places, you can overwhelm your own resources. And I think that, definitely taking antioxidants, frankly, even eating a good diet, you're going to get a fair amount of antioxidants from your food if you're eating a high quality diet. There's certain supplements that can be really helpful. I really like molecular hydrogen personally because it's a selective antioxidant. So we need some of that. We need some of the ROS around, but we don't need too much. So I think that pounding a lot of antioxidants exogenously can actually get us into a whole bunch of other trouble that is not necessarily advisable. But definitely where we land, and I think that this is what's really interesting is, and this is why we're talking, is how do we mitigate it? How do we manage, or what can we do to decrease this load so that we're not going to get rid of it completely. And that doesn't mean that, people should necessarily head for the nearest mountain, which, it's a strategy, but,
not necessarily the most sustainable one.
It's not, and it's not for everybody. It's not everybody's cup of tea. But so what can we do without, sitting in a corner, rocking ourselves to sleep every night going, oh my God, I'm going to die. And that's what really this is all about. Right. So, I find it interesting that you clued in so young that, things were not going well for your friends and family, and that maybe you wanted to have a different path for yourself. Usually the age you came to this realization is the age of, I am invincible. Nothing could ever possibly go wrong.
I had this, but with regards to sports.
I'm sorry?
I had this, but with regards to sports, I was definitely an idiot.
Okay. Oh, I'm glad to hear that. But anyway, so this is all about, how do we reduce the load? And so what got you thinking, but again, like why EMF? Like what was it that got you thinking? And I think you guys started with underwear, right?
Yeah.
That was your first product, which actually is interesting because there's some really interesting research around, I mean, I fought with my son for years about his phone in his pocket, to the point I harangued him to the point where finally he just would put it on airplane mode before he put it in his pocket, which is, it's not perfect, but it's something.
So it's not necessarily a great one. Yeah, just before that, I do want to emphasize on one thing, because I think it's important to outline this, and you've done it pretty well, but it's the constant load that is the issue, and it's the combination of this on top of a lot of, I mean, it's so essentially making a cell phone with a call with your cell phone without putting a headset one day is not going to kill you. It's the problem that we have cell phones around us all the time, that we have Wi-Fi, that we have cell towers, and all of this. And so does, to the analogy would be fast food. A poor diet will increase the amount of oxidative stress in your body, or free radicals. It's essentially the same damaging mechanism. And but it's not because you went to a fast food one day, then all of a sudden you're going to be dying from cardiovascular disease the next day. However, if you were to eat fast food all day, every day, that's when you have a problem, or like 3 times a week or whatever it is. And it's the same with wireless radiation, and it's also the combination between poor eating, wireless radiation. The more of these you're doing, the more oxidative stress you're going to be generating for your body, and the more load you're going to put it under. So if you're watching your diet, and if you're reducing the amount of oxidative stress, amount of external stresses such as wireless radiation or UV, not going out unprotected in the middle of the day, that kind of stuff, then you're setting yourself up for success a lot more than if you're not caring about any of these. So why wireless radiation? It's a great question. I'd heard, I mean, throughout my research, I obviously came across wireless radiation several times. And one day at dinner with friends, and we all put our cell phones on the table and realized that we all had our cell phones in our pockets, and started discussing with my friends, and all of us had heard about the fact that, wireless radiations can be dangerous for our health, and that we shouldn't be keeping our cell phones in our pockets, and yet we all had it in our pockets all day, every day. And this kind of, just like with the sun example, where it's like, okay, don't go out in the sun at 12 p.m. Yeah, that's great, but also like I also want to be living out in the sun and not, staying with my curtain closed all day. And that came to the realization that the external stressors that we're exposed to, unfortunately, are the product of our modern lifestyle, and that all this technology, or all the lifestyle that we have today, is kind of a double-edged sword. And that unless we're going to live on a mountain, we don't really have a solution for it today. So that same evening, came back home and started doing a lot more research about the impact of wireless radiation specifically. And the haha moment was when I landed on the World Health Organization website and realized that wireless radiations were categorized as a class 2B human carcinogen, which is the same class as car exhaust fumes. And I remember being in my bedroom at this stage and thinking, well, if there was a car running right now in this room, I would not be staying in it for a long time. But there is the equivalent in the form of Wi-Fi, in the form of cell phones, et cetera, et cetera. So what could I do to create a solution for this? And that's where I became interested in, all right, well, how can we mitigate as many of these external stressors that we're facing today without changing our lifestyle, without, wrapping ourselves in tinfoil, or
wearing a tinfoil hat.
Wearing a tinfoil hat, mountains. Like, how can we integrate a modern solution to a modern lifestyle in order to keep on having all the benefits from technology and all of this. Kind of try to find the solution that would be the seatbelt for a car, where having cars is amazing, and we're just trying to mitigate the risk of running into a wall and dying from
Nice.
it.
Nice. And actually, why don't you talk a little bit, because there's something we're kind of beating around the bush here, but there's a very direct reason why having your phone in your pocket, particularly as a man, but I think even as a woman, but certainly as a man, having your phone in your front pocket is particularly bad. I think there's a fair amount of research of the effect of these EMFs on sperm motility and viability. Yes?
Yeah, so there's been a lot of research on the impact of wireless radiation on fertility, and it stems down from oxidative stress again. And so the Cleveland Clinic in particular did what is probably the most famous paper on the subject, where they found that men keeping their cell phones in their pockets had about 50% less sperm count men keeping their cell phones in their pockets for more than 4 hours per day, which would be the majority of us out there, had about a 50% decrease in sperm count compared to people who would not keep it in their pockets. And that's on top big. Of this, the sperm quality itself was impacted as well. And by sperm quality, we mean the motility, the lifespan, as well as the correct morphology and correct DNA. All of these factors were anywhere between 30 to 50% less than healthy sperm from people, than the sperm from people not putting their cell phones in their pockets. And this is in association with the fact that men's fertility has been on the decline in recent years, and we've been losing about 2% fertility every year for the past 15 years. Obviously, wireless radiation is not the only reason. And again, external or internal stressors are part of it too. So pollution plays a role into this. Pesticides play a role into this as well. Because all of these actually create the same type of mechanism in our body and increase oxidative stress. But the problem with cell phones in your pocket is that they're directly next to your genitals, and the amount of EMF that your genitals would be exposed to is exponentially higher compared to if you don't have it in your pocket or if you're blocking wireless radiation, because the amount of radiation that you're getting is an exponential curve and not a linear one. So if you're twice as far, if you're twice as close, twice as much closer from the source, you're actually 4 times more exposed to wireless radiation than if you're farther. So with your cell phone literally less than an inch away from your genitals, that's where there is an issue. And with regards to female fertility as well, studies have been done that show that the ovocytes are impacted as well. And it's to me a lot scarier than men's fertility, because men keep on producing sperm throughout their lives, even though sperm quality tends to decline with age, past 30 years old. We still are able to recreate sperm, whereas women have their ovocytes created at birth, and if you damage them, there is no mechanism to repair them. So that can have a lot longer lasting effect on female fertility than on men's fertility.
Well, and on children's health outcomes, right? On having healthy children. So that's all very compelling. So, and actually, I think you mentioned this earlier, having your phone next to your head, which I think is something that at this point, I don't remember the last time I held my phone to my head. just from the reading and learning from people about how much radiation you are exposing yourself by putting that phone up against your head. And I think what's a bit unfortunate is what's happened now is with these wireless earbuds that people are wearing, that they somehow think is better than their phone, and is actually, I remember it was, I think it was Dr. Pompa who did a video with his son where he had an electromagnetic a meter,
EMF meter,
and they an EMF meter, and they measured the EMFs of these wireless earbuds, and you could literally hear the kid's brain frying. Like it was intense. And when I try to talk to people about air tube earbuds, which are these earbuds where you have the earbud, you have an air tube, and then you have the wire below it. And I'm telling them, I'm taking the radiation away from my head, and they look at me like I'm wearing a tinfoil hat. Like they look at me like I'm completely crazy. And I'm like, no, you don't understand.
Well, the challenge with regards to the education level today is that we're facing, just like any industry that is a big industry, like tobacco back in the days,
sugar industry,
PFAs more recently, is that you have industries that have a lot of means, that are oftentimes paying for studies, that have a lot of lobby power with the media or with our political institutions as well. And so there is a lot of misinformation out there as to what's happening exactly. And the unfortunate effect of this is that a lot of people don't understand what the mechanism of harm is. And that's why I'm always happy to jump on a podcast like this and explain the underlying mechanisms, which is not like any voodoo magic or thing. It's actually very well rooted in science, and these mechanisms of harm have been studied for many years now, and we have over 30,000 studies that have shown the effect of EMFs on the body. But it's definitely changing, and there are a lot of laws that are evolving. Just looking at 5G, which is going to happen, and 5G generally is going to be a great thing for society, in meaning that it's going to enable a lot of innovations, including self-driving cars, and it's essentially going to.
I don't find self-driving cars that exciting personally. I like driving my car. Just putting it out there. I'm sorry to interrupt, but
it's one of them. But generally speaking, I mean, it's an overall good evolution of society. It's just one that is exposing us to a lot more of these, but it doesn't mean, because it just means that we need to be aware of solutions that exist and trying to be developing these solutions, instead of the problem with these tinfoil hat analogies that people are thinking, well, you're someone who's against technology or against modern living, and it's actually not true.
No, not at all. I want it both. Like I want technology, but I just want technology that's not exactly going to kill me. So, or faster. So is it possible, like, because one of the discussions that I've heard of quite often is even about 5G, that they could have picked, it would have been possible to pick a different frequency that might have been a little less impactful or less harmful to human cells than the one that was, because this is about bandwidth, right? This is about where does this frequency lie relative to our organisms, as it were. And yet the dialogue never really, I mean, the ship was so far gone from the station at this point. Like it was so gone that the dialogue could never really happen. But, given your engineering background, like, what do you think about that? Like, why is it possible that we could be picking different frequencies as a society that would be less harmful?
To be 100% honest, I never really looked into this.
Okay.
So I would be shooting in the dark if I were giving an answer there. But what I would say is that generally higher frequencies, which is what's happening with 5G, tend to lead to faster speed. So what's happening with 5G is that we're moving to higher frequencies, which have a shorter, which can travel far less than the previous frequencies that we have. So because of this, we're going to have 5G towers
everywhere,
every corner, on every block. in order to cover the grid, and but that's going to yield a lot faster speed.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of the trade-off is we're going to be exposed to a lot more of these EMFs. But again, it's to take the analogy of cars. It's just like when we started developing faster cars, at the beginning, if the car was going 10 miles per hour, not super dangerous. And then as you're going into the 40, 50, 60 miles per hour, now you're starting to see the effect of like, oh, we can actually die from this.
Yeah.
And so is exposure to wireless radiation, so is exposure to pollutants, and that's why organic food has had such an increase in popularity in recent years, is because with everything that pesticides were great in order to keep your plants growing, but there is a flip side, and so with everything we're trying to find the limit of where can we go, and then what can we develop to, like, do we need to back off a little bit, because now that's we as a society is conscious enough of the problem that we want to fix it. That's what happened with tobacco. That's what happened with that's what is starting to happen with climate change, et cetera, or do we try to find another solution for ourselves? And so with regards to sugar, that's why paleo, keto, all of these diets and brands have emerged around this to help people who care about the impact of these on their bodies. So you always have the balance between solutions created by companies and then the political side of things, which is usually a lot slower to react.
Yeah, no kidding. And harder to impact. Okay, so let's move into what we can do. You've come at it now from a very personal perspective. So you started with the phone in the pocket problem and came up with a really very direct solution, right? Your first product was men's underwear, yes?
Yeah, very much so. So I've always been on a mission for myself, which is now the mission of our company, to find solutions with regards to my health, or find routines or what have you, that are kind of like easy fixes to take care of at least 80% of the problem, that have as little impact on my daily life with regards to inconvenience as possible. Hopefully, a lot of impact when it comes to the benefits that it yields. But I don't want to be taking 200 pills a day to supplement on everything. So I'm a customer of Athletic Greens, for instance, which I find amazing because it's one scoop a day, and they're working on what really matters in this scoop, or any type of I've always been a big fan of high intensity interval training, because I can train for 30 minutes and I get the benefits of training for 2 or 3 hours. So always try to look for these solutions that are either set it and forget it, or that enable me to have my cake and eat it as much as possible. So Lambs was very much this. It's like, okay, I'm obviously not going to stop carrying my phone in my pocket, because, well, we check our cell phones on average 150 times a day, which might be an issue in itself, but not really our fight here. And for the most part, like, living with technology is going to be impossible, because technology is amazing, and frankly, I can't get around without Google Maps. So so started looking at a solution that would enable me to keep using all this technology, to keep on having Wi-Fi, and not to be worried about the effect that it would have on my health. And so researched what is there out there that is blocking wireless radiation, found out that NASA spacesuits actually have an inbuilt radiation-proof technology, because you're exposed to a ton of EMFs when you're going into space. And which is the equivalent of, I think, a 6 months journey is the equivalent of 1,600 chest X-rays.
Wow. Even flying on a plane actually not as much as astronauts actually, but flying on a plane definitely exposes you to a chunk of radiation.
a lot of our customers won't fly without their lambs, and myself included, which will give you a pat down at the airport. Full disclosure, because the X-ray machine is working on EMF, so be aware of this. But at least it will, you'll remove the EMF factor of this machine in exchange for a pat down. But we studied that technology, and we essentially used it to inspire ourselves in order to adapt it into fabric. And so we created a fabric that blocks about 99% of wireless radiation, effectively dividing by roughly 1,000 the amount of wireless radiation that is reaching your body. And we're using a principle that is called electromagnetic shielding. And in a nutshell, it works this way. If you have a fence, it's the equivalent of having a fence. I'll use the physical terms and then I'll give the analogy. So wireless radiation cannot penetrate a mesh of conductive fibers if the size of the holes of this mesh is smaller than the wavelength of the radiation. So now that we've established this, and probably most people don't understand what I'm talking about, let's give an example, a real life example as an analogy. There is a fence behind me for those that can see the video. And there is no chance I'm going through this fence because the size of the holes of this fence are smaller than my head.
Right.
Now, in order to make electromagnetic shielding effective, you need, just like this fence, to have enough coverage of whatever you're trying to protect for this to be effective. So with this fence, if it's a couple miles up and down, it's probably way more effective than if it's like 2 yards and that's it. And so similarly, you need to cover almost at 360 degrees around whichever part of the body that you're trying to shield when it comes to clothing. And so we've taken this fabric and we're integrating it then into our t-shirts, into our underwear, into our hats, and it's all around whichever piece of garment we're talking about, which gives enough coverage of the essential organs to remove the majority of wireless radiation that would penetrate otherwise. And a lot of the challenge then, once we had our first prototypes, was to take this fabric and actually make it into something comfortable, because the first iterations were definitely not comfortable. And so we're using silver fibers that we iterated a ton on in order to make them very soft and very stretchy. Silver has the advantage of being hypoallergenic and antibacterial and antiviral, which also kills odors. So you'll smell more fresh at the end of the day. That's a positive side effect as well. And lastly, on the last iterations of our fabric, we also wanted to combat as many external stresses as we could. And so we made our weaving in a way that we are also UPF 50, which means that we're blocking we're UPF 50 plus, which means that we're blocking more than 98% of UV rays from reaching your body, whereas a traditional t-shirt, to give an idea, is UPF 5.
Wow.
So that's the equivalent of 20% of UV rays reaching your body versus less than 2% for us.
Amazing.
And yeah, so that was the solution that we developed. And with this, the benefit of wearing lamps are the same as what you would have with antioxidants when reducing oxidative stress and helping your body reach in this parasympathetic nervous response, or this state of rest and digest, while not having to change anything in our lives. And that was very important for me, meaning that we're focused on making them look as good as possible, on making them super comfortable. And then you just need to wake up in the morning, put on your underwear, put on your t-shirt, put on your hat, like those actions that you're doing every day. But now you're actually reaping the benefits of reducing significantly the amount of EMFs that you're exposed to, as well as reducing oxidative stress from UV rays, and having something that is antimicrobial and odor-free.
So you get to smell good, have good skin, and healthy organs. Yay! Package deal. What did I just want to ask you? Yeah, I mean, I totally love your stuff. And also, did you come out with a baby blanket?
We did,
Are
yeah.
you the guys that came out with a baby blanket? I think that's like the best baby gift you could give to someone. Do you still make them?
We do,
I
yeah.
just
And I
remember
think,
seeing an ad and it was the cutest thing. It was this little baby swaddled in a blanket and it's a lamb's blanket.
yeah, and we have a model with little lambs on it, which is
Of
a
course.
super cute model actually. Um, so yeah, I mean, so babies are in this phase of growing, obviously, and so the more you can reduce external stressors, the better,
For
for
sure.
your little one. And there has been studies associating a higher rate of autism, as well as hyperactivities in kids that are exposed to more wireless radiation than not.
Mhm.
And we had actually our clients are dictating. I mean, science and our clients are dictating which products we're prioritizing. So the way we built Lambs originally was by looking at which organs are most impacted,
Yeah.
and that's how we kind of prioritize our product line. And then we have our clients emailing us all the time asking for products, and so we're always keeping track of this, and when and prioritizing our product development based on what people care about. And obviously babies was something that that came up quite a while,
For sure.
quite a
Yeah, you
few
know,
times.
you need little baby beanies now too.
We do.
Little baby beanies for their heads.
But yeah, trying to prioritize product development based off where can where can we help people get the maximum amount of benefits.
Right.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and uh sorry, cut
Yeah.
you off.
No, that's okay. So, and you said you've done some research on your products and the impact on how people respond to them. Yes, like with HRV and things like that.
So exactly. And what's been very interesting when doing this research was to see the immediate effect, positive effects of wearing lamps. So you obviously have this association with long-term diseases from exposure to wireless radiation or pollutants, etc., cancer. But we also found that wearing lamps, by helping your body being in this rest and digest state, can have a wide range of positive effects, which instantly are the same that you would have with taking a ton of antioxidants.
Sure.
Just probably like earlier, like instead of fixing a problem, we're kind of trying to make the problem go away beforehand. And so
Yeah, no, it's further upstream. You're preventing the problem before it actually happens.
exactly. And so what we found is that by wearing lamps, heart rate variability goes up by an average of 18%
Hmm.
in the subject that did our studies, which were male and female, anywhere between 18 and 65 years old, which HRV is today the most widely used measure of our autonomous nervous response. And a
Wow.
higher HRV is generally associated with a parasympathetic dominance versus a sympathetic dominance. So the higher your HRV compared to your baseline, it's very individual. Like women typically tend to have a lower baseline than men. That doesn't mean anything with that
No.
doesn't mean that more or less into parasympathetic. It's just the way it is. And so having a higher HRV compared to your baseline or compared to where you were before indicates that you're recovering better and that your parasympathetic nervous response or rest and digest is dominant. So 18% increase when wearing lamps compared to not, which is very significant.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm seeing personally with regards to a good night of sleep versus a bad night of sleep, or even alcohol intake or that kind of thing, is usually within the realm of like 10 to 30% variation. So 20% is definitely out there. And then on sleep as well. So we have a ton of our customers, myself included, who are using Oura Ring or Whoop or these kind of devices to track their sleep.
Yeah.
And they notice a significant, there you go. They notice a significant improvement in their sleep. So sleep quality, the length that they spend in deep sleep, which is recovery, or even REM as well, which also makes sense, meaning that if you have a dominant parasympathetic nervous response, your body is fighting off less external stressors or internal stressors, and is able to sleep and recover better. So sleep is a big one. And then cognition. A lot of our customers have reported less brain fog, less migraines, and just generally able to have be more cognizant.
Be more productive. So are you seeing this because people are sleeping in their lambs, or is it from wearing it during the day?
So we've seen it for both.
Both?
Which is interesting. The customers that have had the most drastic changes in their sleep are wearing it both during the day and during the night.
You need a big person blanket.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually fairly comfortable. If you take a size larger than what you are, it makes for a very comfortable PJ.
Okay, TMI alert. I don't sleep in pajamas, so I just...
Fair enough.
I need a blanket. A big person blanket.
It's definitely something that has been asked before. So
I'll bet.
But yeah, and it makes sense, right? Like the less you're exposing your body to external stressors, and the more time you're spending with as little exposure as possible, the better your body is going to be performing throughout the rest of the day, as well, and including.
For sure. Okay. And actually, the other thing I wanted to mention earlier when you were talking about cars is one thing that I know that I've read about is that, with the advent of the electric vehicles, never mind the driverless car. I mean, the driverless car is one thing, but even just electric vehicles, the amount of EMFs that people are being exposed to in these cars, like even now in my car, as you mentioned, keyless entry is wireless, right? The radio, the phone, these cars are really computers now. But when you're getting into a fully electric vehicle, like the amount of EMFs that you're going to be exposed to in that car is going to be, I mean, again, it's yet another exponential kind of exposure. And I think that, to your point, we don't want to get rid of EVs because they're better. I mean, in some ways they're better for the environment. We could talk about the batteries, but we're not going to do that. We gotta have some kind of solutions here, but they definitely solve a problem. But how interesting would it be to show that for people spending time in these vehicles, wearing clothing that at least shields their key organs, their vital organs, would have some benefit to them.
Yeah, for sure. And we're actually working closely with a few athletic coaches of Olympians, and one of the advice that they give their athletes is, if you have an electric vehicle, wear an AMS or don't have one. And full disclosure here, it's not because it's going to kill you if you drive into an electric vehicle without AMS. But for athletes especially, the studies have shown that testosterone production is impacted as well, which is very important for performance for male athletes. And generally speaking, it's very important for athletes to be in this parasympathetic dominance when they're not training, because that means a better recovery. And recovery is essentially all that they're focusing on when they're not training, because that means that they can push harder the next time and get more. So that's why there is so much emphasis on for athletes to be wearing lamps when not training, is because it's an additional edge for them, which for a normal person is not as important in everyday's performance than for someone whose job it is.
Yeah, I mean, it depends where your sensibilities lie, right? I mean, when you were in the world of when we're in the longevity space, which is a space that I'm in, and we're saying, okay, I want to live a lot longer than one might have expected previously. And not only do I want to live longer, but I want to, in those later years, I want to be performing really well. I want my brain to be working. I want my legs, I want all of me to be working, because if I'm going to be 120 years old, like a little blob in a wheelchair, that actually doesn't appeal to me that much. So we're talking about the long game here, right? So obviously it's not that driving an electric vehicle without protective gear on is going to kill you today or even next week, next month, or whenever. But it's what we were talking about before, is how much of these chronic stressors can you mitigate without actually putting in a lot of effort, or really changing your behavior that much so that you can still enjoy all this technology and all of these new things without necessarily exposing yourself to more risk.
100%. And to be frank, I look up a lot to athletes, and I think like a lot of what they're doing makes sense to integrate in in our daily lives. Oftentimes it's fairly hard to have the same routine as someone whose job it is to do this.
Yeah, no, exactly.
The goal we can take that they're actually doing that we can translate into our lifestyles of normal people, the generally the better it is for us. There are exceptions, but in this case, wearing lenses is probably a fairly easy one to integrate.
For sure. Okay, well, I think we've covered a lot of ground. Is there anything we left out, do you think, Arthur? Is there anything else you'd like to say?
Well, I think probably the one thing that I would love to emphasize on again is the compounding effect, which is to me a key element of health, which is the more factors you can mitigate, or the more factors you can work on, and the earlier you do it, and the more consistent you are with them, the better you're going to reap the benefits. And so it's not all about EMF protection, but it's also about generally having a healthy lifestyle, eating healthy, and exercising, etc. And all of these are important pieces of the puzzle. So don't go about, and I don't think going about and wearing Lambs and then eating McDonald's every day is the way to do it. Just like I don't think eating healthy but never exercising, sleeping too hard at night, and not wearing Lambs is also not great. So having a balanced approach and looking at all the pieces of the puzzle is to me super important. That doesn't mean that you need to go overboard with everything, but if you're able to check, I love the 80-20 principle, which is like you can do 20% of the work on all of those, and you're going to reap a lot more benefits than if you're going all in 110% just on one of these factors. So yeah, that's probably my take on having a balanced approach to health without becoming without being too stressed out about
exactly. Why are you so sick? Well, I'm really stressed about not being sick, about not being healthy. Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, there's definitely a fine line, and and integrating stuff into your clothing if you can, and at least, as we talked about before, I mean, for some people it's going to mean wearing their Lambs every day. For some people, like me, every time I'm on a plane, this is like my body armor, right? Like and I was talking to Crystal, I'm like, when's the hoodie coming out? I need a hoodie.
Huh? We're working on it.
Yeah, I'm sure you are.
What's interesting when you're still a moderately small company compared to the Nike of the world, is that we're very focused on creating amazing products and that look good and feel good, and that actually takes a lot of time. Yeah. On the bright side, though, when we do come out with products, generally that means that we've taken the time to make them amazing. So
absolutely, no, and I respect that. I'm just I'm just encouraging. That's all. Okay. Well, I know that we have a discount code, like a promo code for people who are listening to this podcast. I don't have it with me right now, so we'll flash it on the screen at the end of the podcast, and I'll talk about it in the intro, and it'll be in the show notes. So guys, Arthur was very kind to extend a great deal to you if you decide you want to get your hands on some Lambs. And I know that you're always coming out with new things, like you've got that beautiful new red, the mineral red color that just came out. There's a long sleeve shirt that came out that I'm waiting for because, when it's snowing outside, the short sleeve shirt's not really going to cut it for me. So you've always got great new innovative things, the baby blankets. There's a new baby in your world. That could be a really great gift. So thank you. Thank you so much, Arthur, for taking the time to talk to me today. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for allowing us to speak to your listeners as well. And for anyone who is interested in learning more, whether it is about the science, we are constantly updating our website for more information and more education about the underlying science, so you can dive a lot deeper than what I just did on this call, or the technology, or to check out our products. So just head out to getlambs.com, and you'll be able to find a lot more information.
Amazing. And you're on Instagram as well, right? Also Get Lambs.
Yeah, we're on all platforms at Get Lambs, and our website is getlambs.com.
Okay, I have one last question for you.
Yeah.
Sure. Why lambs?
Question.
It's just the closing question. I have a bad habit of keeping podcasts going after I say goodbye, but why lambs?
Yeah. So when we first started working on the technology itself, the main question that we're getting, and to be frank, based on the first prototype, it was a valid question, was how is it going to feel?
Yeah.
Is it going to be, you used the word body armor before, which most body armors are not really comfortable.
No.
So, when we were looking for our brand name, we wanted something that was emphasizing the comfort aspect of the protection. And lambs actually have this wool that is protecting them from the cold, right, but in a very comfortable manner. And that was for us very important to outline the fact that we went through literally hundreds of prototypes of the fabric before settling on what is today our proprietary technology, in order to make it super comfortable for daily wear. And
if you're going to put it on as underwear, it better be comfortable. Gotcha. All right. Okay. Well, that's a great answer. Thank you so much. Okay, Arthur. Thank you again.
Thanks, Natalie. Have a good one.
You too.